politics in Trinidad and Tobago is decided basically on a racial basis. The two main races in Trinidad and Tobago being those of African descent, Africans, Afro-Trinidadians, blacks, according to how politically correct or what version of racial identity you're using, African, black, Negro, Afro-Trinidadian, etc. And then the other being Indo-Trinidadian, Indian, East Indian, those of East Indian descent, Indo-Trinidadian, however you'd want to say that. Those are the two main racial groups. Now, really and truly, when I look at my life in Trinidad and Tobago and understand the relations between the cultures and races in Trinidad and Tobago, that allows me to throw out a lot of the modern thinking on race as rubbish with this whole racism could only be prejudice plus power. That's nonsense. Trinidad and Tobago, there are racial people who have no power. There are people who hate you based on your race. They despise you based on what race you were born into. So there is that here in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, it's widely known that a lot of the people in Trinidad also use racism as a bit of a cudgel, as a bit of a tool, because the politics is divided along racial lines. So for politicians, if I'm a politician who gains my power by getting those of African descent to vote for me, then there may be some benefit to me kind of fueling a bit of racial tension to ensure that all of those of African descent keep in my camp, and likewise for those of Indian descent too. So with the politicians, there is vested interest in stoking those racial flames continuously. And there have been many cultural sayings, songs, little ditties written about that. We do party how we does vote, and those kind of statements. The idea being that the politics divides us more along racial lines, while the day-to-day living, if you live in some village, some community, if you live in Trinidad and Tobago, you recognize that many people are not actually that racist in the day-to-day living. That's not to negate the fact that there indeed are many racists in Trinidad and Tobago. Some people say that there are no racists, it's all politics. I disagree. There are some people who legitimately dislike you based on your race. Now, for me, I don't think that is so much of an indictment necessarily on a person. I think it's human nature. Human nature is racism. Human nature is tribalism. We tend to have in-group biases where we are more biased to the people that are more familiar to us, whichever group we belong to. So it's understood, and groups that are more insular, groups that have spent more time by themselves are generally more tribal, more racist even. So the racism by itself may not be a problem. Well, it may not be hard to understand, but it becomes a problem when we have a multicultural country like Trinidad and Tobago, and we're attempting to run it into the future, get some progress done. How do we do that? I was reading several articles recently that brought some of this again to the fore, starting with a statement brought from the president, or former president, the first female president of Trinidad and Tobago. And it's interesting because we now have our second female president. 2 out of our 7 presidents have been women, and interestingly enough, one woman was of African descent, and now one woman is of Indian descent, which is interesting along those lines. But the former president gave an interview, and in the interview she spoke about some of the things she saw online regarding this whole racial tension in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're going to dive into that. If you like this kind of content, make sure you hit that like button. If you have something to say, drop a comment. I do read all of the comments on all of the different platforms, so drop a comment if you have something to say. If you are not yet subscribed, please do subscribe. New videos are coming. Leaders must lead when it comes to race relations. Paula May shocked at racism on social media. Former President Paula May Weeks spoke candidly on TT's use of social media, saying many of the comments she saw were racially biased. She described those at the top as not only politicians, but also media personalities. Weeks said during her 5 years in office, she paid very close attention to social media platform Facebook. Now, I think this is a positive thing and a bit of a negative thing too. There's a lesson to learn here about people who are who are more in the public's eye about your usage and consumption of social media. There's a lesson to learn there. And there's also a lesson to learn here about your use of Facebook and social media, because sometimes you're just pelting stones at the tree, thinking there isn't any life looking back there. But yeah, the president of Trinidad and Tobago, the president of our state, was reading a lot of those comments. If you left a silly comment on the president's page during her time in office, a high chance that she did read it, according to what she's saying here. I don't think I'm different from any responsible citizen from being absolutely appalled at what plays out in social media on a racial basis, she said. Weeks said she accepts that there were many decisions and pronouncements she made as president that could be subject to scrutiny, discussion, and disagreement. But sometimes when you look at the comments on social media, they are so racially biased. She cited one comment on the Office of the President's page, and although one could not know who it truly was because it was just a name, that name was of East Indian heritage. And she's right. I regularly do this. I regularly go through social media, and you go through the comments on some of the news pages, some of the Express, Guardian, Newsday pages, the news channels. You go through those comments and you read them, and the racism that plays out in a lot of the comments is appalling, truly. And you look at the surnames, and it tells a story. See, in Trinidad and Tobago, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, most places in the world, you could kind of tell general. You could make some vague general assumptions based on the nature of someone's surname, and it's no different here in Trinidad and Tobago. And you could look at surnames and you see that very same thing. And the point she's making there is she doesn't understand why the disagreement has to be along racial lines. If you disagree with what I'm doing as president, if you disagree with it based on your political ideology, based on what you think would be best for the country of Trinidad and Tobago, that's fine. Then you state your position like that. But her problem is, she's seeing, when she looks at it, she's seeing not disagreement based on a point trying to be made, not this disagreement based upon strategy, but the disagreement is racial based. Now, the problem with that is it becomes nearly impossible to get things done logically in Trinidad and Tobago. I cannot make a logical argument to convince a racist to choose what I'm choosing. They're convinced by racial arguments because racism isn't based on logic. It's a bias built in at the emotive base level, at that tribal level. It's like programming the operating system of a human being. Your operating system is infected with this racism. So when logic tries to come in to make logical political arguments, you kind of just throw it out because the racism is the primary differentiator there. And that's a problem. That makes politics in Trinidad idiotic. No one needs to make sense. I just need to blow that dog whistle at just the right tone for just the right people to hear, and they will come running to my aid, running to my side, whether I make sense or not. Some of the comments are so abusive, she went on. If you don't agree with the point or decision, that's fine. But why do you need to be abusive? And then why is your abuse in racist terms? You can just disagree with the principle, and that's that. I think social media has given people an opportunity to express themselves, and I think it is something that feeds on itself. Sometimes it is not really what you are feeling, it is not what you do day to day, but you just like the idea that you can fire off any kind of ignorant, abusive idea under the anonymity of social media, and so you do it. She's right. And this is kind of the problem with people like Miss Paula May Weeks reading too much social media. Someone like me, if I were to have 150,000 people on all platforms following me, I could tell you, I assure you, I will not read all of the comments, because even right now, I only have on TikTok 22,000 somewhere there, people following me there, and the most viral of videos, the videos that go up there in views, you see the comments, and regularly there would be someone in there that's not right. But if you take the percentage of humans, if you take 100% of humans, I'm sure that 1%, 2% are psychopaths or narcissists or sociopaths or Machiavellian or some kind of thing like that. So there are people really weird and outright insane out there. The problem, the solution to that in reality is that when you walk day to day, if you act out your psychopathic tendencies, someone is going to do something about it. You can't do that in real life. You walk around in real life and say some of those things, you will find out very soon that Trinidad doesn't function like that. You go and cuss someone about their race in the wrong place in Trinidad, and you will be assaulted, and chances are the police may not do anything about that. But on social media, you have the cover of anonymity. And even in some cases where it's not total anonymity, you may have your real profile there, but you have the cover of social media. Each time you pull each layer, you pull people away from face-to-face interaction, it makes the interaction more and more strange. For example, road rage. Even road rage is more accentuated than if everyone was walking along. The fact that you are behind the glass, protected in a capsule, as it were, of your vehicle, makes road rage much easier. Those women that drive on to you and then turn around and cuss you up, they would not do that if they came in person and saw a 6'2" man and this woman just run up to him and do that. That's not how reality really plays out. But in a car, in a vehicle, when you feel that distance between the real people, you get that happening. And then if you pull that even further apart, where someone could be in Florida and someone could be in Trinidad and Tobago, that makes it even much easier for these kinds of things to go on. And that's why, as someone, if you're someone who has a lot of social media following, taking too seriously the gauge of social media comments is not a wise thing. There are many people there who are just doing it for the kicks. Social media, for one, may encourage more psychopaths to comment, because as a psychopath, I know this is the place I could get my kicks out. You know, I could go onto social media and throw all of my poison and rubbish out there and be fine with it. So I will live on social media. I feel if you do a study on that and study the amount of time regular people spend on social media versus people with mental deficiencies, people that have mental pathologies, if you check the length of time they spend on social media and compare it to the average normal well-balanced person, I have a sneaking suspicion that those with the pathologies would be on social media a whole lot more. So your study group on social media, the cohort of people you choose to look at on social media, is leaning towards psychopathy already. So, you know, you have to take that with heaping loads of salt. And heaping loads of salt, speaking of that, the president said that, you know, a lot of this comes from the leadership. And what she's looking for is leadership from the political class to lead the country out of this kind of discourse, lead people away from this. And interestingly enough, she was saying that at one moment, and someone who has interest in ruling the country was saying something that seems to be totally opposite to that, seemingly at the same moment. Monkey, not racist. The political leader of the Progressive Empowerment Party, Philip Edward Alexander, is defending a comment he made in which he compared Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley to a monkey in the zoo. Alexander was speaking during a political event at Ramsaran Street, Chaguanas on Saturday. Yesterday, he said the words were taken out of context. Monkey, ape, gorilla, and chimpanzee comparisons have racist connotations and have been used to dehumanize and insult people of African descent for centuries across the world. In a video circulating on social media, Alexander said Rowley in full monkey flight, because at half times I expect Rowley at some point to fling feces at the media like the chimpanzees at the zoo, Alexander said while mimicking the actions of a monkey swinging its arms. You don't watch him? Alexander continued in the clip. But yesterday, Alexander defended his comments during a telephone interview with The Express, saying he was referring to the Prime Minister's behavior. What I said is that Keith Rowley behaves like a monkey. He comes across like that. And I wondered if it was deliberate, if it was to send a message to the media because he behaves like that with media practitioners. Now, the thing is, I am not sure what he means by behaves like a monkey. The monkey-like adjective, what does that describe? If you say somebody behaves monkey-like, what are they behaving like? Because I know in most cultures in the world, a little monkey, when not used in the racist connotation, is oftentimes used in a kind of playful, childish sense. I forgot the statement in Spanish where they combine child and monkey together as a statement of endearment, where it's you're a little monkey, you're my little monkey, you're a little wild monkey as a little child. So monkey wild? Is he behaving wild with the media? When you say he's behaving monkey like, do you mean wild? What is the adjective of monkey like with the media? Because what he is saying there sounds like he means aggressive. It sounds like he means off the handle, out of control. And if that's the case, there has already been an animal comparison used for Dr. Keith Rowley on that note. Rowley the Rottweiler has been a widely used a comparison since, like, what, 2 decades now? The former Prime Minister Manning spoke about that. So, if there's already Rottweiler, and Rottweiler explains aggression way better than monkey, if there's already Rottweiler, why would you choose monkey chimpanzee? I'm not getting it. I really am not getting it. And I'm not saying necessarily that this is obviously a racial tone. I am not sure. I don't know. To be honest, I didn't even watch that video. I don't know. But it struggles reasoning. It strains reasoning. I don't understand what the adjective he's attempting to use there is supposed to be describing. Alexander further stated, people don't need to make my comment something that it is not to make themselves feel relevant or to create problems. This is about his behavior, not about racism. If I call Kamala a monkey, would that be racist? The answer is an obvious no, unless the minds of people hearing twist the narrative to dog whistle. Here's the thing. I would hope that Mr. Alexander, being someone that wants to lead a multicultural country like Trinidad and Tobago, would understand racial dynamics better than he speaks here. Because if you call Kamala Persad-Bissessar a monkey, it wouldn't be seen as a racial statement because she's not of African descent. If you do something making fun of Indian culture and make it a reference to Kamala, it would be seen as racist because she is an East Indian woman or a woman of East Indian descent. So obviously what would be seen as a racist connotation for one race wouldn't be seen as a racist connotation for the other. That's not revealing anything spectacular there. Keith talks about things all the time, but nobody holds him accountable for them. I totally disagree with that, Mr. Alexander. Keith talks about things all the time, yes. He says some nonsense regularly, yes. But nearly all the time Mr. Rowley speaks, someone is going to criticize something he says. So to make it seem like nobody in Trinidad ever criticizes anything that the Prime Minister says is ridiculous. That's not true. Especially when he calls people all kinds of nasty things. That's, again, not true. I remember reading an editorial just last week, was that from Ralph Maraj. Ralph Maraj wrote an editorial either last week or week before where he spoke about Dr. Keith Rowley not being in that kind of leadership mold, and he made reference to the Barbadian Prime Minister Miss Mia Mottley and spoke about in comparison. He juxtaposed the two of them and compared Rowley to Miss Mottley and the utterings of both of them. So to make it seem like nobody speaks about how Dr. Rowley speaks is ridiculous. That's not true. Even I speak about it, and I'm not at that top media level yet. When Keith does it, the same people who want to stand in his defense have to be able to raise their voices. 2 men dressed as gorillas tried to rape a woman in a sari as a skit, and these same people who condemned me were okay with that. Here's the problem with that, Mr. Alexander. When that was done, the PNM had to come out and apologize for it, because there was a racial undertone that was seen there. 2 men dressed in monkey suits assault a woman dressed in a sari. It obviously seems to have some kind of racial undertone going on there. Because of that, much fewer was raised in the public in Trinidad and Tobago, and the Prime Minister and the PNM had to apologize for it. So to use that as your comparison point, are you saying that your comparison here is if I did something like that monkey and Sari skit, I wouldn't apologize because I saw no apology here. So what are you saying, that they should not have apologized for that skit? That was a good thing? Alexander said the criticism he is getting on social media platforms for his comments is from hypocrites. I know the politics of TNT have a lot of hypocrisy and the PNM and UNC manipulate the narrative to keep their followers engaged, but the majority of people will dismiss the fact that average Trinidadian listen to what I said and they don't have a problem with it. I don't know if that's true. The average Trinidadian listen to what he said and don't have a problem with it. I don't know if that's true. I may say that I may not take necessarily racial umbrage from that automatically, but I'll say that was not a wise statement. And the irony in that to me is he's speaking about how Dr. Rowley speaks, and very often Dr. Rowley speaks in a crass, unthinking manner, where it seems like, he didn't think through what he was saying perfectly before he said it. And ironically, it seems like you're doing the same thing. As a non-Afro hopeful leader in Trinidad and Tobago, to use monkey chimpanzee as your adjective to describe the Afro political leader in Trinidad and Tobago is very unwise. You're saying that Dr. Rowley uses many names to call people and nobody tells him anything about it. Okay, well, you're saying when Dr. Rowley does it, it's a bad thing. If it's a bad thing when he does it, why would you want to do it too? I don't understand that. That does not add up to me. And in that tone, I could go back to what the former president was saying. And okay, I understand there is the racial tension in Trinidad and Tobago, and there may not be necessarily anything you could automatically do to just erase that, but we could choose to elevate people into positions of leadership, people who have an understanding how to use their words to unify, not to stir up the tensions more and more, because those words aren't unifying. At least that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? You can drop your comment, tell me what you think. That's all I have for now. I hope you are educated, informed, or entertained, and I will see you in the next video.